This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 217 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is friendships with fellow travellers. So I am of the firm belief that the friends you make travelling are always very, very special friends indeed. You're likely to be like-minded because you met them when travelling, so therefore they like travel, and you probably met them under circumstances that give you some more things in common. For example, the country you were visiting or the way you were travelling or something like that. So I think the way that you make friends when you travel is quite unique to, the kind of the other friendships you make in life. And it's also the case, as you'll hear in today's episode, that friends you make when traveling are often friends that you spend kind of an intense burst of time with, kind of, day in, day out for some time, be it a week or two or months or, it's a different kind of friendship. So I was thinking today about all of the different friendships I have with my fellow travelers, the amazing people I've met over the years. And I was actually pondering, what story will I tell when I record my podcast tonight? And then, literally, there was a knock at the door and it was a delivery truck, and the delivery person gave me a bottle of gin and a note. And it was from one of my very, very best friends from traveling, Cham, who I met in Cambodia, and he is now living in Bangkok. And he had surprised me with an early bottle of gin for Christmas and a beautiful note. So I thought, okay, that is the perfect example of a friendship with a fellow traveller. We met Cham, I think must be 2 years ago, a bit over 2 years ago, in Cambodia and Vietnam. And since then, it's really lovely because he's a friend of both me and my son. His age is kind of in the middle and we both love him dearly. So he's a great travelling friend. Since then, we've met up and holidayed with him in Thailand and in Malaysia. In fact, our very last overseas trip pre-COVID was to KL, to Kuala Lumpur, and we hung out with Cham there for a few days. So he's one of those very special friends from travelling that we know will always be a good friend. So I thought that was very timely. So thanks again, Cham. It was such a surprise to get such a lovely, a thoughtful note and a really beautiful surprise gift, and actually brought a tear to my eye. And then I thought, oh my goodness, this is so timely, just in time for my podcast episode about friendships with fellow travellers. So it could not have been more perfect. So that's just one example of one of mine. But I now have 3 guests who have their own examples of friendships they've made with fellow travellers, and they're all just delightful stories. It's a very happy episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed putting it together. And my first guest is Tasha Goldberg, and she has a brilliant example of a friend she made in Senegal in Africa.
I keep in touch with a lot of people that I meet while I'm traveling, and it is an incredibly enriching and beautiful experience. And it's something that during the moment when you're creating these friendships, it's so rewarding. But then having the continuation of the relationship is also incredible. One, because you continue to know each other and share back and forth. But I also find that it helps me as a communicator, with my work being a lot about communications, to create the messages or the stories that I want to share in a way that is accessible to the friends that I've made in different parts of the world. And so I think that helps me to know that that's who I'm talking to. When I share something on social media, I'm not just sharing it with the people I went to high school with. I'm sharing it with people that I've met and who I keep in touch with. And it's incredibly touching to feel. I used to have this idea that I wanted to kind of create a collection of archiving my worldwide aunties, because there was a time where I felt like everywhere I went, I would meet an older woman who sort of took me in and made sure that I was eating my breakfast and not just drinking the coffee, and that those relationships continue to be part of my life. But a particular example, I would say, so at one point I had traveled to Senegal. I was going on an assignment, and I, just as like a backstory, I won't get into the detail, but I was coming from Bangladesh.
Right.
And I was in Bangladesh during a very, there was a lot of political unrest. There were protests in the streets. We had like a lot of guards with guns that we weren't allowed to leave the hotel. And I had to get my yellow fever vaccination before I went to Senegal. So I had to kind of decide if I was going to navigate through the protest and go to a hospital in Bangladesh for my vaccination, or wait until arrival in Senegal's airport and get it at the airport before I actually was allowed into the country. And so obviously neither of these, were
not perfect options. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was sort of, I had chosen to go in Bangladesh. And so just to give you the background of knowing that I was coming from a full 15-hour day that was extremely intense, not only to make it through the traffic and crowds of people in protest and into a hospital where I did not know the language and was exposed to conditions that were quite different than what I was normally exposed to, then to get on a plane and fly from Bangladesh to Senegal.
Wow.
So that was how I arrived in Senegal. And when I arrived, I was told that we were not allowed to leave the airport right away because the King of Morocco was part of a parade that was moving through the area where the airport was. And so I was sort of ushered into a waiting room of some sort where I was to wait until, and I was exhausted. I was really tired and really like overwhelmed. I went into the waiting room, and when I was there, the young woman who was, the hostess of some sort of this waiting room, she and I talked for hours because we were the only people really there.
Wow. And
we talked about, it started that there was a painting on the wall of people dancing, and we started talking about music and dancing, and we ended up like going out into the parade together and dancing and with the music that was, the drums, and we met up throughout. So I was in Senegal for about 3 weeks, and we, she would come and pick me up at the hotel, and we would go into the huge markets and pick out fabrics. She took me to the places that she and her mother would go for the tailor to get clothing made, and we spent a lot of time together. I remember one time we were walking through a market and we ran into her auntie, and her auntie insisted that we come back to the house for tea. And another time when her mother invited me over for a meal, and we spent a lot of time together, and I wanted to give her a gift, so sometimes sharing gifts can be like great, but sometimes you don't want to like offend somebody and give them a gift in a wrong way. And so I had a few simple gold bracelets with like charms of like different stones, and when we would walk together, we would hold hands, just like a lot of the women when they walk through the markets, and she would always sort of like, play with my bracelets. And so one of the last days that we were together, I like wrapped them up in a package and I gave them to her, and she was like, really happy to receive them. And then the day that I left Senegal, the woman from the front desk said there was a package for me. And the friend of mine, she had picked out a fabric, because we had this whole adventure around fabrics and making clothes. Well, she picked a fabric that she already had, a fabric that she had bought years and years ago, and she had taken it to the tailor, who now had my measurements from other clothing that I had made. She had a dress and jacket made for me in a style that I didn't pick out, and it's, to this day, I have it with me here.
Oh, wow.
To this day, it's one piece of clothing that I had made that I still wear regularly. And it was so meaningful because it was such a thoughtful, kind, generous gift. And it was something that she gave me that I didn't ask for,
Mm-hmm.
and I gave something that she didn't ask for, and we continue to be friends and still are friends. And it's in that moment, I really felt like I had a sister, and she
Mm.
really brought me in to experience what it was like to share food and laugh. And we spent several days and afternoons together, and it was a really beautiful friendship. So
Oh.
that's one of the dear friends that I feel like I made while I was traveling.
Tasha's story is a beautiful one of, making a really close friend quite by chance, but it's also about putting yourself out there and talking to people. And sometimes that's really hard in a foreign country. And in this case, Tasha was exhausted after, a really long travel day and some dramas before that. But she still put herself out there, chatted away, and obviously it was super worthwhile. So I love that. Now, my next guest is Travis King. Now, I have to warn you, the sound is just a slight bit dodgy on this. He was recording from a hotel in Mexico where the Wi-Fi was not quite perfect, but it's still good enough to listen to, and he has a great story to tell. Now, I also have to tell you, Travis refers to level 3 fun a few times in this chat, and Travis told me a great story about level 3 fun, which will be coming up in an episode in the new year. It's but basically, to shortcut it for now, level 3 fun is the kind of fun that could be a disaster, but turns out to be a great travel story. And there is a very interesting and funny piece of level 3 fun in this story about how Travis makes friends with fellow travelers.
I've always traveled alone, and it's also, weirdly enough, one of the first questions people ask when I get back from a long trip. So I get back to the States, I'm in Chicago or Milwaukee or wherever. People always, one of the first questions is, what's it like to travel alone? And my genuine answer is, it's basically getting somewhere alone and then immediately trying to make it less lonely. Like it turns that part of you on where you're like, I don't want to be alone. So I'm going to just start talking to this person that's like, on the bus or across from me at this table at the hostel or whatever it might be. And so I've always loved that about travel. Just it forces you to try to find that human connection, and it makes you search for, who's the next person I can get on with and have a good experience with. And I've had so many friends that, it's like you meet them the next day, you book the same volcano hike or coffee bean tour or whatever it might be, and you go through that adventure and you go out for drinks with them that night. And then there's no way that you don't just automatically start to feel like you're bonding with that person. And one of the first guys I had that with was this Irish guy named Brian. And he was 7 years younger than me. We met each other in Colombia. And I was heading from Medellin to Salento. It's this place in Colombia that has the world's tallest palm trees. And I remember that morning, we'd partied together the night before. And that morning I told him about my plan. I was like, yeah, I think I'm getting out of here. Actually, I'm going to go to Salento. He's like, I think I'm going to come with you. And that decision, or that him just kind of telling me, I think I'm going to come with you, it led to us traveling together for about 4 more months. And we ended up making a whole travel family. We picked this girl, Allie, in Quito, who joined our crew. And then it was the 3 of us with this guy, Simon, from Latvia. He was with us for most of the time. We ran into this group of Australians that Allie had met earlier, actually. So then we became a group of 7. We picked up a guy from New Zealand, a guy from Scotland. So at some point, we had this travel family. And we were all just together making every decision for like the last 2.5 months or something that I was in, all through Peru and all through Bolivia.
That's so cool. Did you actually call it a travel family at the time, or is that just your shorthand now?
I think we started to towards the end of it. Yeah, actually.
I love that.
Yeah, and there's not that many, like different hostels or kind of like, backpacker scenes to connect with. So the same, like the backpackers that were traveling in that same season as us that we would see kind of heading south. We were all on our way south, right? So we'd see some of the same people at different times at different hostels in Cusco or wherever we might have been. And we would always call them the cousins of our travel family. So I guess, obviously we would not be the travel family. Yeah, and we were like the nuclear family. We had all these cousins that we would see, and part of we were able to connect with them. But yeah, like it's just such a condensed experience of life where like those people I spent 2.5, 3 months with, but every day, like every waking moment of every day, every meal of every day, and so many lifetime memories, going to Machu Picchu, going to the Salt Flats, going to the Amazon in Bolivia. We had a level 3 fun story there where Lisa got her, the guides were like, no, the dolphins are nice. They never bite. And then Lisa got her foot bitten by a dolphin and like got pulled under the water. It's like a scene of like Jaws. Yeah, like
I
straight up
thought
scary.
dolphins were nice. That's terrible.
They were, yeah, these are like scary river dolphins that are pink and they're kind of ugly actually. So we were like already kind of scared of like going in the water with these guys. And it's brown water. You can't see anything. They're just splashing around you. It's super scary. And then she actually got bit and pulled under. And the guide was like, she has a fish foot. So we just laughed about that forever. Like that Lisa's feet looked like fish. And it did make the fact that she got bitten. She was bleeding. It was like a pretty serious bite, but it made it all seem so funny when the guide just called it a fish foot. And yeah, it's like one of those things where 3 days later she was bandaged up. She was totally fine. We were just like, yeah, it's level 3 fine. Like no worries. Like we got through it and we're all cool. But yeah, those people, we went through a million of our favorite life moments together. And there's no way to not feel like you're just this little travel family. And you could go to college or somebody for 4 years and have less memories and less experiences with somebody than you could in 4 months of backpacking together through South America or Asia, wherever you might be in the world. And I've always found that like it forces on you just intimacy that nothing else in life can do in that like saturation, that amount of condensed time.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And also the fact that you're probably like-minded in the first place to have met each other in those circumstances. If you're doing a fairly long-term backpacking trip in a place like South America, you've probably got a fair bit in common to start with. And then when you spend all that time together, then you really bond.
Yeah, and you feel like you need each other. So like this is the people I want to do this with. And yeah, it's crazy to start something alone and then feel so connected to somebody at the end of it. And you realize only 4 months or something at best.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I always recommend to people, like it's obviously fun to plan a trip with one of your best friends or something and say you're going to go backpacking through Europe together, whatever. Like if that sounds appealing, go for it. I wouldn't say not to, but I would also say that it's a very different thing to go traveling alone. It's a very, teach you everything you need to know about yourself and the world and your place in the world. Yes. And so I always just, encourage people to go for that, like to go do your trips with your friends for sure, but have an experience where you take a one-way flight somewhere into the world that you're a little bit scared of with a certain amount of money and no return flight home and just go see what happens. Just go find out because the world will reward you for making that decision for sure.
100%. Absolutely. And it's a very rare case that you'll end up lonely when you take a path like that. Yeah,
exactly. You'll show up and you'll feel lonely and you'll be like, how do I fix this? And you'll fix it. Like you'll talk to the person across from you and hopefully they'll be nice. And like we talked about earlier, when you're traveling, like the community feel and the openness of the travel culture just will always reward you to look across, the table at a bar or the hostel or wherever and say, hey, what's up? Where are you from? I'm Travis. I'm whoever. And people will always be so generous with that kind of energy. And I love that.
Now, I have made tons of friends while traveling, but I do sometimes think, I missed out on doing that kind of, gap year or long-term backpacking trip when I was, late teenager, early 20s, when it's really easy to make, what kind of Travis described as this travel family. I just love that idea. I'm sure it's never too late, and one day I will make my own travel family, I reckon. But I will be looking out for those dolphins. Those dangerous dolphins. Now, my final guest today is Monique Chicato, and she had a chat with me. She's actually a fellow WA girl from here she lives here in Perth usually, but she has gone to Norway recently to be reunited with her partner. And so she spoke to me from her quarantine hotel in Norway. We had a long chat because she had, all the time in the world, poor thing. It was really interesting to chat with her. But anyway, and this topic about friends she's made while traveling, she told me about a particular trip which was quite unique and definitely conducive to making close friendships.
Some of my best friendships have come from a trip that I did to New Caledonia. That trip in itself was just insane. I basically won a 10-day holiday to New Caledonia, and it was called the Caledonian Dream. So as a part of this kind of Caledonian Dream that they were doing, they'd chosen one person from Australia, which was me. Don't know how I managed to snag that, but I won it. So it was me. There was an Italian, a French, someone from China, someone from New Zealand, and someone from Japan. And so we'd never met each other before. And the whole idea was that we would all go to New Caledonia and do this 10-day trip, but the whole trip was a surprise. So we had absolutely no idea what we were doing.
You only knew where you were going and that was it?
Yes, we only knew that we were flying into New Caledonia and that we would be picked up from the airport.
Oh, how exciting. Wow.
It was so exciting, and it was the most incredible thing. I was so shocked that I won it. And then I remember getting to the airport, or like the day before even, and I had this moment of panic and doubt, and I was like, what if this is all a hoax? What if this is all a joke? And I get to the airport and there's no one there.
Fair call.
Right? Because we were literally told nothing. And I had to email them and I was like, do you have any idea of like what I should pack? Like, is
Good
there,
question.
you know? Yeah, we ended up getting to New Caledonia, and for 10 days there was myself, a man called Dario from Italy, who was and still is a radio presenter. There was Marion from France. There was Aya from Japan. There was Ethan from China. And there was Linda from New Zealand. Yeah, it was 10 days. Is that 6 of us? 7 of us with me in there. 10 days of the 7 of us with 3 or 4 people from the New Caledonian Tourism Board, Nouvelle Calédonie.
Uh-huh.
So we basically still, every day we had no idea what we were doing. We basically just got told the night before that we have to meet at a certain time and we have to wear and bring a certain number of things.
Right.
And then it was all a massive surprise. So,
wow.
Oh, it was absolutely insane. And I think the fact that we were all on this incredible adventure together, that we had no idea what we were doing. We're from all different corners of the globe. Our hosts from Nouvelle Calédonie as well were the absolute best. But yeah, I think the whole not knowing what we were doing just brought us so close, and I ended up being like best of buddies with Dario from Italy. He ended up being my husband because he took on the feminine role in our relationship.
Cute.
And complained the whole way down the river that we were kayaking down for 4 hours. And when I say we were kayaking, I was kayaking and he was in the back complaining and taking videos and photos of everything while I kayaked us.
Oh dear.
We had the best time, and our videographer and photographer as well. So there was 2 of them there, and Marine we basically got really close, and she was like the French version of me and I was, the Australian version of her. We were just so similar. And oh gosh, honestly, we formed the best bond. We actually cried when we got to the airport and had to say goodbye to everyone. And it was awful to say goodbye, but I still talk to them today, and this was maybe 4 years ago. And if I wasn't confined to Norway, at the moment, I absolutely would be going and visiting Marion, who has just had her first child.
Oh, exciting.
And I would, so she messaged out of the blue and was like, I've got a surprise for you, and showed me, her side profile, and,
lovely.
told me that she was having her first baby, and I spoke to Dario not so long ago as well, and he's now got a new partner, and they've just got their first little puppy together. And so, yeah, actually, even the team in New Caledonia, one of the guys there he's just gorgeous. His name's Bastien, and he's actually from France, but he's been living in New Caledonia and moved there with his partner. And we speak every now and then as well. And, he's so keen to come across to Australia and visit me in Perth. And, I keep telling them that I'll go back there one day as well, because it's, the dream island. But, we just built this amazing connection between all of us that I don't think there'll ever be a time where we'll forget each other. And, if one of us is in each other's country, we'll definitely be messaging each other and, arranging to catch up.
I love it. And I think Monique's example about it being a group tour is also worth mentioning. I definitely have been thrown together in groups of people as I've travelled, especially for kind of work, blog, podcast related travel. And I found people that have become firm friends. and that definitely that being together, for a condensed kind of intense period of time really does make you form those friendships faster. So, and I wish I'd won the Caledonian Dream. That sounds amazing. One day. All right. So a massive thank you to my guests for their stories about the friendships with fellow travellers today. First up, I chatted with Tasha Goldberg, and you can find more about Tasha's project Evidence of Hope on the website evidenceofhope.com. Lots of great stories there. Next up, I chatted with Travis King, and you can find more about what Travis is up to at traviswking.com. And lastly, I chatted with Monique Ciccato, and you can find her at moniqueciccato.com. That is CECCATO.com. Of course, I will put all of the links to these in the show notes, along with links to, you remember my friend Cham I mentioned at the beginning. He was in a couple of episodes a while back. He was in episodes 114 and 116, and I'll link back to them as well. And all of this stuff will be in the show notes. For today's episode, the show notes are at notaballerina.com/217. Don't forget, of course, to come and chat about your friendships with fellow travellers in the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers, and the link for that is in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.